My daughter-in-law thought she was clever when she slipped something into my drink at the dinner table. But what she didn't know was that I saw everything. So, I calmly switched our glasses. And that's when the real drama began. Many people underestimate how far jealousy and greed can push someone in a family. They think elders don't notice, that we're too old or too trusting to catch on. But what happens when the person they underestimate turns out to be 3? Steps ahead? In this story, you'll see how a daughter-in-law tried to betray me in front of everyone, how I turned the tables without saying a single word, and how her own scheme ended up destroying her. This is a tale of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold. Before we get into it, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I bring you real stories of betrayal, family drama, and revenge, so you'll never miss a twist that could teach you something about trust, loyalty, and standing up for yourself. Part 1. The dinner setup. Family dinners used to be my favorite. The clinking of plates, the smell of roasted chicken, the laughter bouncing off the walls. It reminded me of the old days when family actually meant something. But ever since, my son got married. Dinners had changed. His wife, my daughter-in-law Rachel, had a way of turning even the simplest gathering into a battlefield. Not with shouting or fights, no. She was too clever for that. Her weapons were whispers, side comments, and looks designed to cut me down, while everyone else thought she was being sweet. That night, the dining room was full. My son sat proudly beside her, oblivious to the tension. A couple of cousins had joined us, and my niece was cracking jokes across the table. From the outside, we looked like the picture of a happy family. But inside, I could feel the undercurrent, the subtle competition Rachel always sparked, the need to assert her place at the head of the household. She dressed like she was hosting a royal banquet, even though it was my table. A diamond necklace glittered on her chest, catching the chandelier light, as if she needed to remind everyone she belonged to money now. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes, sharp. Watching me, measuring me. I'd learned to endure it. Years of little digs had thickened my skin. Oh, you still cook like that? Well, in my family, or you must be tired, maybe you should. Let younger people handle things. Always wrapped in sugar, but sharp enough to sting. I usually ignored her, but that night, something told me to stay alert. It happened while my niece was telling a funny story about her college professor. Everyone was laughing, forks scraping plates, glasses clinking. That's when I noticed Rachel's hand. It was quick, too quick. She reached under the table, her wrist twisting slightly, her fingers brushing something in her lap. Then, as if she was just adjusting her napkin, her hand hovered over my glass. I narrowed my eyes, pretending to focus on my niece. But I saw it clearly. A small object, maybe a packet, maybe a pill, slipping into the amber liquid in my glass. The faintest fizz, gone in an instant. My heart skipped, masking my reaction. Now, most people would have gasped, jerked, called her out immediately. But I've lived long enough to know better. When someone wants you to lose your cool, the worst thing you can do is give them the satisfaction. So I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I chuckled at my niece's joke, clapped the table lightly, and nodded as though nothing had happened. Inside, though, my mind raced. Why? What was she planning? Was it something dangerous or just humiliating? Did she want me to feel sick? To embarrass me in front of everyone? Whatever it was, I wasn't going to be her victim. I let a few minutes pass. Conversations flowed. My son was bragging about a new project at work, Rachel laughing a little too loudly at everything he said, trying to draw all the attention back to herself. Meanwhile, my eyes kept drifting to that glass. My glass. The one sitting right beside my plate, shimmering innocently in the candlelight. Then it hit me. If she thought she was clever enough to trick me, I'd show her what real cleverness looked like. Without a word, I slid my glass closer, to her side of the table. Smooth, casual, like I was simply making space for a dish being passed around. Then, when she wasn't looking, I swapped it with her untouched drink. The switch was silent, invisible to everyone, except me, and suddenly, the fear in my chest vanished. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was in control. The moment before, Rachel glanced at me, her lips curling into a smug smile. She thought I was about to drink. She thought her plan was already working. But instead, I lifted her glass, now safely in front of me, and raised it in a toast. To family, I said, my voice calm, steady. May we always cherish these moments together. Everyone cheered, glasses clinking. My son laughed, raising his drink. Rachel hesitated for a split second, her eyes flicking to the glass in front of her, the one she had tampered with. But she couldn't back out, not in front of everyone, not without looking suspicious. So she lifted it and she drank. Part 2. The switch takes effect. The glass touched her lips, and in that instant, the entire room seemed to slow down. I watched her carefully, my face calm, almost bored. To everyone else, I looked like a gracious host, raising my drink to toast the family. But inside, I was focused on every twitch of her face, every flicker of her eyes, every shallow breath. She took a sip, a small one at first, then another. Her smile faltered just enough for me to notice a crack in her perfect mask. Nobody else saw it. My son was too busy telling a story about work. My niece was still giggling at her own jokes, and the cousins were clattering their forks on plates. To them, it was just another moment in a cheerful dinner. But to me and Rachel, it was a battlefield. Her eyes darted to my glass, then back to mine. For the first time, she looked uncertain. She had expected me to drink, to choke, to stumble, to make a scene. Instead, I sat there with a serene smile, sipping safely from her untouched drink. I didn't need to say anything. The silence between us said it all. It didn't take long. Within minutes, she began shifting in her seat. Her laugh, usually loud and piercing, came out shaky. She tried to join in conversations, but her words stumbled, her voice cracked. "Are you all right?" my son asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. She waved him off too quickly. "I'm fine. Just a little warm in here." Warm. Yet I could see her skin pale, her forehead glisten with sweat. Her fingers fumbled at her necklace, as if the diamond choker around her neck was suddenly too tight. I leaned back in my chair, slow and deliberate, and took another sip of my drink. Her drink. Her eyes snapped to me again, and I smiled. Just a small, knowing smile. The kind of smile that said, "I know exactly what you did." The strangest part was that everyone else kept eating, laughing, passing plates of roast chicken and mashed potatoes like nothing was happening. My niece asked me about my garden, and I answered calmly, describing how the roses were blooming early this year. All the while, Rachel fidgeted beside my son, tapping her nails against the table, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird looking for an escape. Nobody else noticed, or maybe they didn't want to, but I noticed everything. At one point, my son raised his glass for another toast. "To my wife, the love of my life," he declared, grinning proudly. Rachel lifted her glass again, hesitated, then pressed it to her lips. Her hands trembled. She didn't drink, not really. She only let the liquid touch her mouth, then set it down quickly. The move didn't fool me. She was terrified. Her eyes met mine again, wide and pleading, as if begging me not to expose her, as if begging me to let her keep her secret. But I didn't speak. I didn't accuse. I just kept smiling, sipping calmly, enjoying my meal, because I knew that the more silent I stayed, the louder her guilt would scream. Finally, she leaned toward me. Her voice a strained whisper meant only for my ears. "What did you do?" she hissed. I turned slowly, met her eyes, and said softly, enough that nobody else could hear, "Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing." Her face drained of color. She froze, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. That was the moment she knew. That was the moment she realized her clever little trick had backfired. The rest of the meal, she barely touched her food after that. Every bite seemed forced, every laugh hollow. She kept glancing at her glass, then back at me, as though waiting for me to call her out, to expose her in front of everyone. But I didn't. I carried on with polite conversation, complimenting the dishes, laughing at jokes, even asking my son about his project. I behaved as though nothing unusual had happened, because the truth was, I didn't need to expose her. She had already exposed herself. Her nervous fidgeting, her pale complexion, her inability to focus. It was all there for anyone paying close. Order attention. And sooner or later, someone else would notice too. By the time dessert was served, the shift was undeniable. Rachel, once the queen of the table with her loud laugh and sparkling necklace, now sat hunched, silent, her fork barely scraping her plate. My son kept asking if she was all right, and she kept brushing him off with excuses. Just tired? A little headache? Not hungry? Meanwhile, I sat tall, composed, sipping coffee with steady hands. I didn't need to win an argument. I didn't need to prove anything, because in that quiet battle of wills, I had already won. Part 3. The aftermath at the table. At first, it was only me who noticed. Her pale skin, her shaking hands, the way she pushed food around her plate without eating. But little by little, her discomfort became impossible to hide. The room was still alive with chatter, my niece laughing about her college roommate, my cousin talking about a new job. But in between the laughter, I saw heads turning toward Rachel. It was my cousin who spoke first. "Are you all right, Rachel? You look a little off." Her fork froze midair. "Oh, I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just maybe the chicken was a bit salty." Everyone chuckled politely, but her answer didn't match her trembling hands. My son leaned closer to her, concern etched on his face. "Honey, do you want some water? You don't look well." Rachel shook her head too fast. No, I'm fine." She even laughed, though it came out shaky. "I just didn't sleep well last night, that's all." But her eyes betrayed her. Wide, darting, panicked. She glanced at me again, just for a second, then dropped her gaze to the tablecloth. My subtle move. I decided it was time to add a little pressure. Nothing obvious, nothing loud, just a nudge to push her deeper into her own guilt. I lifted my cup of coffee, took a long, slow sip, and said casually, "Strange, isn't it? How sometimes what we consume has unexpected effects." The words hung in the air like smoke. My niece nodded, oblivious. "Oh yeah, like caffeine keeping you up all night," she said cheerfully. But Rachel froze. Her hand, clutching her fork, tightened so hard her knuckles went white. She knew I wasn't talking about caffeine. She knew those words were for her, and when her eyes flicked to me, I met her gaze with the calmest, most knowing smile I could muster. Cracks in the facade. She tried to laugh it off, tried to carry on like nothing was wrong. But guilt is a heavy mask to wear, and hers was slipping. Her voice grew weaker each time she spoke. She dropped her spoon twice, fumbling to pick it up. At one point, she excused herself to the bathroom, only to return 5 minutes later with damp hands and an even paler face. My son whispered to her, "Are you sure you're okay?" "You're worrying me." "I'm fine," she whispered back, but it was unconvincing, even to him. The others start to notice. By the time dessert arrived, even the cousins had stopped chatting. The room wasn't filled with laughter anymore. Instead, glances kept darting toward Rachel. "Maybe you should lie down," one relative suggested gently. She waved them off with a shaky laugh. "No, really, I'm fine, just tired." But nobody believed her anymore. The once perfect daughter-in-law, the one who loved to show off, to outshine, to dominate conversations, was now hunched, sweating, struggling to keep her composure. And me. I sat there with steady hands, calmly cutting into my slice of pie, watching her crumble. My son's breaking point. Finally, my son couldn't take it anymore. "Rachel," he said firmly, "something's wrong. If you don't tell me what, It is. I'm taking you to urgent care. Her eyes widened. No! I just don't feel well, that's all. The panic in her voice was too sharp, too defensive, and I could see it in his eyes. Doubt. A seed of suspicion planting itself in his mind. My final pushy set my fork down gently and looked around the table. You know, I said in a calm, steady voice, sometimes when people feel sick at the table, it isn't just because of the food or lack of sleep. Sometimes it's because of something they didn't expect to drink. The room went silent. My niece blinked, confused. My cousin tilted his head. My son frowned. But Rachel's face drained of every last trace of color. She dropped her fork with a loud clatter and stared at me, frozen. I didn't accuse her directly. I didn't shout. I didn't expose her plan outright. I didn't need to. The silence, the weight of my words, the way I looked at her, it said everything. Her collapse, Rachel stood up suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "Excuse me," she muttered, her voice trembling. She hurried from the table, nearly tripping on the rug as she fled to the bathroom again. The room buzzed with whispers. What's wrong with her? She doesn't look good. Is she sick? And my son, poor boy, sat frozen, torn between following her and staying seated, his face a mix of confusion and dawning realization. The power was mine. I leaned, back in my chair, sipping the last of my coffee, perfectly composed. For years, she had mocked me, undermined me, thought of me as nothing more than an obstacle. She thought I was too old, too blind, too weak to see what she was doing. But tonight, with nothing more than a quiet switch of glasses and a few well-placed words, I had turned the entire room against her. She had wanted me humiliated. Instead, she humiliated herself, and I didn't have to raise my voice once. Part 4. The Private Confrontation. When dessert plates were cleared and the last of the coffee cups were empty, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rachel hadn't come back to the table after her dramatic exit. She'd locked herself in the downstairs bathroom for almost 20 minutes, and when she finally emerged, her face was washed clean of makeup, her eyes red as though she'd been crying. She muttered something about not feeling well, and insisted she just needed rest, but nobody was convinced. Whispers in the kitchen, relatives began excusing themselves early, murmuring awkward goodbyes. My niece leaned in to hug me and whispered, "What's going on with her?" I just patted her hand. "Sometimes people reveal more than they intend," I said softly. Her brows furrowed, but she didn't push. By the time the last cousin left, the once lively house was quiet again. My son closed the door behind them, his smile gone, his shoulders stiff. He turned to Rachel, who stood with her arms crossed, refusing to meet his eyes. The first question. "What happened tonight?" He asked, his voice calm but heavy. Rachel laughed nervously. "I told you I wasn't feeling well." He shook his head. "That's not what this was. You looked terrified at the table. Everyone saw it. You couldn't even eat." "I said I was fine," she snapped, her voice sharper this time. I sat in the armchair in the corner, silent, watching. This was their moment. But I knew my silence was louder than anything I could say. Her excuses. Rachel launched into excuse after excuse. Maybe it was food poisoning, or low blood sugar, or maybe the wine didn't sit well with me. You know how sensitive my stomach is. But her words tumbled over each other, too quick, too rehearsed. My son frowned. "Then why didn't you just say that? Why act so defensive? Why run out of the room?" Her voice cracked. "Because everyone was staring at me, okay? I felt embarrassed. I finally spoke, my voice calm and even. Embarrassed people blush, Rachel. They fidget. They make excuses. But you looked guilty." Her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. "Are you accusing me of something?" I folded my hands in my lap. "I don't need to accuse you. You already accused yourself." The shift in my son looked between us, his brows furrowing deeper. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Rachel opened her mouth, ready to fire back, but I met his gaze steadily. "It means actions speak louder than words, and tonight, your wife's actions told us everything." "Don't listen to her," Rachel snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "She's twisting things to make me look bad. She's always had it out for me." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply leaned back and said, "Interesting. You say I twist things, but I haven't accused you of anything specific. Yet here you are, panicking, as if you already know what I saw." My son's doubt. That was the crack in the armor. My son's face softened with confusion, doubt creeping into his eyes. "Rachel, why do you sound like you're hiding something?" Her breath hitched. "I'm not. I'm upset, because she's always judging me, always watching. Me like I'm some criminal." "Then why can't you look me in the eye right now?" he asked quietly. Rachel froze. She tried, but her gaze darted away almost instantly. The calm blade. I stood slowly, smoothing out my skirt. My voice was calm, but each word landed like a blade. "Listen carefully, both of you. Tonight, I saw something I wasn't supposed to." "See?" And instead of owning up to it, Rachel tried to bury it with excuses. But the truth has a way of clawing itself to the surface. Always. Rachel's hands shook. "You don't have proof," she hissed. I smiled faintly. "Don't I? Her." Breath caught. My words had struck home. Because proof wasn't just in objects or recordings. Proof was in her face, her trembling hands, her inability to hold her story together. My son's growing anger. My son stepped closer to her now, his voice low but firm. "Rachel, if you're hiding something, if you tried to do something tonight, I need to know, because right now it looks really bad," she stammered. I would never," but the words rang hollow. Her voice cracked. Her lips trembled. I could see the doubt hardening in his eyes. The seed I had planted during dinner, now growing into something undeniable. Her desperation. Finally, Rachel turned to me, her face flushed with panic. "Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to ruin my marriage?" I didn't blink. "I don't need to ruin anything. You're doing a fine job yourself," she gasped, stepping back as though I'd slapped her. And in that moment, my son finally looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what I had seen for years. The cracks beneath the perfect mask. The silent victory. Rachel stormed upstairs, muttering under her breath, slamming the bedroom door behind her. My son stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, fists clenched, eyes clouded with confusion and anger. He turned to me, searching for answers. But I simply picked up my empty glass from the table, the same one she had tampered with earlier, and said softly, "Be careful who you trust, son. Sometimes the person you think has your back is the one holding the knife." Then I set the glass down and walked away, leaving him alone with the truth slowly dawning in his mind. Part 5. The Fallout. The house was quieter than I'd ever known it. Rachel had locked herself upstairs, slamming the bedroom door so hard the frames rattled. My son lingered at the bottom of the staircase for what felt like an eternity, staring upward as though he could see through the wood, searching for answers that would never come. I didn't push him. I didn't need to. I'd done enough. Now, all I had to do was let the truth unravel on its own. The gossip begins. The next morning, whispers started spreading. Families are like glass houses. Secrets never stay hidden for long. My niece called. Me, her voice low but eager. "What happened last night? Everyone's talking. People said Rachel looked like she'd seen a ghost. Did she really get sick? Or was it something else?" I didn't give her the whole story. I just said, "Sometimes people reveal their true selves without meaning to." That was all it took. By lunchtime, the story had spread. Cousins called cousins. Aunts called uncles. The version twisted with every retelling, but the heart of it stayed the same. Rachel had done something wrong. and I had caught her. My son's questions that evening, my son sat me down at the kitchen table. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Mom," he said quietly, "tell me the truth. What did you see?" I sipped my tea, calm as ever. "What do you think I saw?" He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know, but Rachel's acting strange. She won't look me in the eye. She's been crying all day, saying, 'You're trying to ruin our marriage,' but I can't shake the feeling. She's hiding something." I set the cup down gently. "Son, love can blind us, but it can't blind us forever. If she has nothing to hide, why is she so afraid?" He said nothing, but I could see the doubt gnawing at him, just as I knew it would. Rachel's excuses. Over the next few days, Rachel tried everything to cover her tracks. She told relatives she'd had a panic attack. She told neighbors it was food poisoning. She told my son she was just tired and overwhelmed. But the more she explained, the less sense it made. Her stories contradicted themselves. One day she said it was the chicken, the next day the wine, the next day her nerves. My son listened, but the doubt in his eyes grew darker each time. The family's reactions. Relatives started calling me privately. "She didn't look sick," one cousin said. "She looked guilty," said another. One even asked outright, "Did she do something to your drink?" I never confirmed it. I didn't have to. My silence was answer enough. And silence, I've learned, is the loudest weapon of all. The breaking point, it all came to a head one evening. My son returned home early, finding Rachel pacing the living room, muttering to herself, "Why won't she just leave us alone?" She snapped when he asked what was wrong. "Why won't you just admit what you did?" he shot back. She froze. He hadn't planned to say it, but the words tumbled out before he could stop them. And now, there they were, hanging in the air like a blade. "I didn't do anything," she shouted, too quickly, too defensively. "Then why can't you even tell a straight story?" he pressed. "Why did Mom's words rattle you so much at the table? Why did you look like you were caught?" Her lip trembled. "Because she hates me. She's making you doubt me." But it was too late. The seed of suspicion had already grown into something undeniable. Her slip-in, her desperation. She said the wrong thing. "Even if I did, you'd never prove it." The silence after those words was deafening. My son's eyes widened, his face hardened. "So you did do something," he said quietly. Rachel gasped, realizing too late what she'd revealed. She tried to backtrack, stammering, No, I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was done. The collapse. That night they fought, the kind of fight that shakes a marriage to its core. Voices rose, doors slammed, tears were shed. Didn't interfere. I didn't need to. The truth was doing my work for me. By the next morning, Rachel had packed a bag and stormed out to her mother's house, muttering that she needed space. My son sat at the kitchen table, his head in, his hands. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted. "But I can't live like this. I can't be married to someone I can't trust." My quiet victory, I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Trust isn't about words, son. It's about actions. And actions always reveal the truth." He nodded slowly. His eyes clouded with heartbreak, but also with clarity. Rachel's mask had slipped. Her own actions had destroyed her, and all it took was one quiet switch of glasses. The days after Rachel stormed out of the house were some of the quietest we'd had in years. No slamming doors, no fake laughter echoing through the halls, no sharp little comments aimed at me under her breath. The silence felt strange at first, but then it felt good. Peaceful. My son walked around in a daze, as though someone had pulled the rug from under his feet. He kept checking his phone, reading her messages, sighing heavily. But with every hour that passed, I saw his confusion slowly giving way to clarity. The family whispers. It didn't take long for relatives to start gossiping. Families are like villages. One spark of drama becomes wildfire overnight at Sunday, brunch. My sister leaned in close and whispered, "I heard Rachel left, People are saying she embarrassed herself at your dinner. I simply stirred my tea and said, sometimes people reveal themselves when they think no one is watching. That was all I had to say. The rest of the story wrote itself. By the end of the week, cousins were calling me, aunts were texting me, all sharing the same sentiment. We always thought something was off about her. It was amazing how quickly their tune changed. The same relatives who used to praise her charm now shook their heads at her downfall. Rachel's attempts. Meanwhile, Rachel tried to spin the story in her favor. She told her side of the family, had set her up, that I was jealous of her place in the family, that I'd been trying to turn my son against her from day one. But lies are fragile things. The harder she tried to push her narrative, the weaker it sounded. Too many people had seen her pale face, her trembling hands, the way she ran from the table like a guilty child. Her explanations didn't match her actions, and in the end, actions speak louder. My son awakens one night. My son sat me down at the kitchen table. He looked tired, older than his years, but there was a new strength in his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe Rachel was everything she pretended to be. But I can't deny it anymore. She's been manipulating me, manipulating us, and you were right all along." I placed my hand over his. "I didn't need to be right, son. I only needed you to see for yourself. Love can blind us, but the truth always finds a way to shine through." He nodded, his jaw set. "I don't know what's next for us, but I do know one thing. I can't build a future with someone I can't trust." The downfall over. The next few weeks, the cracks in Rachel's perfect mask widened. Friends stopped inviting her out. Relatives whispered behind her back. Even her own family began questioning her behavior. She tried to return once, suitcase in, hand, tears streaming down her face. She begged my son to forgive her, swore she'd change, promised she'd never do anything like that again. But my son stood firm. Change isn't about promises, Rachel. It's about actions. And your actions spoke louder than anything you're saying now. When he closed the door behind her, her sobs echoed down the street. But he didn't waver. That was the moment I knew he'd finally broken free. My quiet victory. Did I dance around the house in triumph? No. Did I shout, "I told you so"? No, that's not how true revenge works. True revenge is quiet. True revenge is sitting at the same table where someone once tried to poison you. Not with chemicals, but with humiliation, and sipping your tea calmly while they unravel on their own. Rachel thought she was clever. She thought she was powerful. But all it took was one switch of glasses, one calm smile, and her entire facade collapsed. She exposed herself, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Lessons learned. In the end, Rachel lost the very thing she wanted most: control. Control over my son, control over me, control over how people saw her. She went from the golden daughter-in-law everyone admired to the cautionary tale everyone whispered about. And me? I didn't gain power. I gained peace, because I finally saw. My son opened his eyes. I finally saw him step out of her shadow. And for once, I didn't feel like the villain in her twisted story. I felt like the survivor, the one who waited patiently, silently, until the truth revealed itself. The beauty of quiet justice. Justice doesn't always come with shouting, fighting, or courtroom battles. Sometimes justice comes at a dinner table, in the silence between two glasses. Rachel thought I didn't notice. She thought I was blind. She thought age made me weak. But she forgot one thing. Experience is the sharpest weapon of all. And that night, with nothing more than patience and silence, I proved that, sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. When I look back on that night, I realize it wasn't just about a glass of juice. It wasn't just about Rachel trying to slip something into my drink. It was about power, about respect, about underestimating someone because you think they're weak, when in reality, they've been watching and waiting the entire time. What she thought? Rachel thought she could outsmart me. She thought I was too old, too distracted, too trusting to notice a small flick of her wrist at the dinner table. She thought her beauty, her charm, her fake sweetness would shield her from suspicion forever. She thought I was blind. She thought my son was blind, and for a long time, maybe he was. But what Rachel didn't realize was that masks always slip. And when they do, the truth doesn't just come out, it explodes. What I learned that night taught me something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't about yelling across the table, pointing fingers, or exposing someone in front of a crowd. No, the best revenge is calm, silent, patient. Because when you stay calm, you force the guilty to reveal themselves. When you stay silent, their own panic becomes the loudest sound in the room. When you wait long enough, you don't even have to destroy them. They'll do it themselves. I didn't have to shout at Rachel. I didn't have to accuse her directly. All I had to do was switch. 2 glasses. That single move flipped the power, and she never recovered. My son's awakening. For years, I worried my son would never see her for who she really was. I worried he'd stay blinded by her manipulations, trapped in her web of control. But that night, as he sat at the bottom of the stairs, confusion in his eyes, I knew the seed had been planted. And in the weeks that followed, I watched that seed grow. Doubt became suspicion. Suspicion became clarity. And finally, clarity became freedom. It wasn't me tearing their marriage apart. It wasn't me planting lies in his head. It was Rachel's own actions, her own guilt, her own arrogance. She destroyed herself. The family's lesson. The rest of the family learned something too. For years, they saw her as perfect. The charming wife, the ideal daughter-in-law. They laughed at her jokes, admired her style, envied her confidence. But once the mask slipped, they realized what I had known all along. Appearances mean nothing without integrity. Some whispered apologies to me later. We should have believed you. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need validation. I already had what I wanted. Peace, quiet justice. There's a beauty in quiet justice. No yelling, no chaos. Just a subtle move that flips the entire script. Rachel wanted me humiliated that night. She wanted me to drink from that glass and suffer while she watched. She wanted to laugh at me, to turn me into the fool. Instead, she drank her own poison. Not just what she slipped into the glass, but the poison of her own greed, jealousy, and deceit. And the moment she realized what I had done, when our eyes locked and her face drained of color, that was justice. The true revenge people think. Revenge has to be explosive. That it has to end with shouting, slammed doors, dramatic confrontations. But the truth? The best revenge is when you don't have to lift a hand. When you let someone's own actions destroy them. When you stand still and calm while they crumble under the weight of their own schemes. That's what Rachel never understood. That's why she lost. My final reflection. A's. I sit here now, sipping tea in the quiet of my own home. I still keep the memory of that night close. Not because I enjoy reliving it, but because it reminds me of something powerful. Never underestimate the quiet ones. People like Rachel look at silence and mistake it for weakness. They look at patience and mistake it for submission. They look at kindness and mistake it for blindness. But silence can be sharper than a blade. Patience can be deadlier than a trap. And kindness, when betrayed, can transform into a force stronger than rage. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. You don't always need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight fire by letting it burn itself out. You don't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words ever could. And you don't always need to destroy your enemies. Sometimes you just need to hand them the glass and let them drink from it themselves. Because in the end, The sweetest revenge isn't anger. It isn't punishment. It's peace.